Good morning, everyone who's joining us. Good morning. Good morning. I don't know about you. You can feel free to put into the chat. I'm logging in from Edmonton, where I was just telling David, I think the farmers are happy with the weather, but not those of us who don't like to wear rubber boots. So feel free. We're going to encourage your comments and your questions in the webinar. So feel free to tell us where you're logging in from, and if you love the rainy and stormy weather, if that's what you're getting today. Is that what you're getting down south, David?
Uh,
Rainy,
just
stormy?
about. We're on the verge of some rain, thankfully. I think the firefighters will be grateful for that as well.
Yes, I know. And that's where I want to be careful to say, I am happy for some of that weather. So, okay, as folks are doing that, it's $1 million rain. Very true. Very true. I love that. So, as we're getting started, I thought we'll just do an introduction. So, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Michelle Devlin, and I'm the owner of Creating People Power. And I am absolutely delighted to carry on, along with my co host Christine, this passion project that Linda Mall started, who is my former business partner and owner of Creating People Power. So, this is a community for leaders who are readers. And you will hear us say that word a lot, community. So, a very warm welcome to those of you joining us today. And if you're listening to the recording afterwards, very welcome. Warm welcome to you as well. And I will let my co host Christine introduce herself.
Thanks, Michelle. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. So I'm an executive coach and consultant. I work with Michelle in Creating People Power, and I'm a longtime book club fan, both personally and professionally. As a leader, I created a reading community for my department and saw great benefit from it. And so it's a true joy to join Michelle in continuing Linda Mall's legacy.
Nice. Thank you, Christine. So we have a couple of guidelines for our community through the work that we do around respectful and psychologically safe workplaces. We really want to make sure that we're guided by our values, which are respect, flexibility, trust, collaboration, and relationships. So we believe in a collaborative approach, both to our client work and any conversation that we have with our partners. So we are very passionate about reading and creating community. And I have a sign in my home that one of my friends bought me that says, "Come as you are." And that's what we want to create space for here in this conversation today. It guides our community. We strive to create a psychologically safe workplace and also just space for conversation. So feel free to send your questions and put your comments in the chat. If you want to send them to myself, Christine, or David individually, you can feel free to do that. Probably myself or Christine is easier, just so that we can ensure David is staying focused on his thought, but he's also very savvy webinar host. So the purpose of our conversation today is to get some insights from the books that we read or are recommended to us from people like you to offer us both personal and or professional growth. It's a chance for you and Christine and I to personally connect with the authors, get their insights and perspectives. And maybe if you're writing a book or you have a book, in your future, maybe there's some questions that you want to ask the author either about the book. And even if you haven't read the book yet, my hope is that you'll gain some insight from this conversation. So I'm excited to introduce David, who is a globally recognized leadership speaker, author, and advisor who helps leaders build human, healthy, and high performing organizations. And I can say it by leading in a very authentic way. I can attest to this. I've seen David speak a number of times for over 40 years. David has worked as a family therapist and in the leadership development field with leaders seeking to become more authentic and effective in their roles. David is the best-selling author of 7 leadership books and hosts a podcast, More Human Together, with his daughter, Haley, and I'm going to refer to that at the end of the webinar as well. He teaches in the graduate program at the University of Calgary's Faculty of Social Work and the Haskayne School of Business, and serves on the board of Men's Shed Cochrane, where men support men to build a better community. So please help me welcome David. We are so delighted to have him joining us here on what's almost the 10-year anniversary of the book. I'm so excited. Caring is everything. So, David, for those who maybe haven't read the book yet, can you just give us some insight as we start off on what inspired you to write this book?
Well, yes, and just before I do that, thanks, Michelle and Christine, for your invitation and the graciousness of your having me here. And I love this notion of readers of the pack, and I love that whole notion. So I'm been on my mother. I inherited the gift of my mother when she died. It was interesting when she died broke, and but I didn't get her financial inheritance. But what I got was much better. I got her values, and one of the things I got was her library. And in her library, she said, "I leave my passion for learning to you, and I hope you pass that
Oh,
on to your kids." So that has stayed with me all my life. So,
that's
so
great.
how did this book come to be? It's really interesting. I used to think that you had to know something to write a book about it. And what I've learned is if you want to learn something, write a book. So some people go back and get another degree. Some people go back and take a course, which is great. And I have taken plenty of courses myself. But this has been one of my paths to learning is to take on a project to write a book about it. Now, that's what I've been doing for the last 35 years since I started writing books. I never saw myself as an author. I had English teachers in my education who said I should be writing more, and they liked my writing. But I've never really seen myself as a gifted writer, but I just love to learn. And that's how I learn is by writing. So
Oh,
that's my
I
first
love
thing.
that.
The second thing is in terms of this particular book, while I was during this time, my brother, who was a rural physician in Sundre for 35 years,
Mhm.
was diagnosed with a brain aneurysm, with a brain tumor, and my and he was so I was caring for my brother for 3.5 years, and during the process of caring for my brother, I was also I'm always writing, and I was writing a book
Mm.
about organizational culture, and it was really boring. I could not get my heart into it. I would read the manuscript and it just wasn't where I wanted it to be. And I was really searching for something. What do I want to learn about right now? And my brother's Hal, he had a very good childhood friend who lives in Texas and Lubbock, Texas. He teaches in the entrepreneurial program at the University of Texas. And he had driven up that summer. I think it was the summer of 2014, if I'm not mistaken. But he came up and we had these long conversations. He stayed for a week and he and I looked after my brother. And in the evenings, I was talking to him about this book, and I said, "What?" He said, "What do you really want to? What do you want to learn about, and what do you want to write about?" And I said, "I'm
Mhm.
not sure." And he said, "Well, why don't you write about Hal and about your experience of taking your brother through the dying process?" And it really intrigued me. And then I thought, what would be the theme and what would have the value for people? And he said, "Well, you've pushed him around the hospital grounds on many occasions, and he was loved as a doctor. He wasn't just respected and admired; he was truly loved. And what makes a great doctor, I found out, is what makes a great human being, and that he cared."
Mm.
And so Ron and I actually had these conversations about how we might frame a book around caring. And that's always how my books have emerged. They haven't
Mm.
necessarily emerged from a strategic plan, but just kind of had emerged from a magical moment that sparks that says this is something that I really would love and have a passion for. And I dedicated the book to my brother because I
Mhm.
learned so much about how talking to his patients and his colleagues and his community, he cared. He cared about his community. He cared about his profession, his work. He cared about
Mm.
his patients, his
Mhm.
colleagues. And he was actually awarded just before he was diagnosed the outstanding family physician in Alberta by his peers.
Mm.
And it was because he cared so much. So that's where the birth of this all came.
Mhm. And I remember you telling that story when I received the book at a conference as a gift, and I read the book at that point, and then I reread the book after I lost my mom and had been a caregiver. So that is actually what sort of inspired Christine and I to invite you as one of our first guests as we launched Readers of the Pack from when Linda had it, because there is such a human element. And I will tell you that it is page one where I got hooked into the book because you wrote, and I'm going to quote, when we live a life that we are born to live in alignment with our authentic self, we discover meaning, purpose, and fulfillment in our lives. And I read that book. When I read that quote the second time, I thought that really describes the book in from my perspective. But I would love for you to offer our audience insight into maybe what that means for you personally, because I think everyone who reads quotes like that, it might resonate differently. So that's how it resonated for me. Um, yeah, when we live a life that we're born to live in alignment with our authentic self, we discover meaning, purpose, and fulfillment in our lives.
Well, the whole focus of my work the last 40 years has been to connect people to their authentic self. And it's my
Mm-hmm.
premise that we are born authentic, that we are born, this is our birthright self. We come into this world with a seed of possibility, a destiny, just like an acorn seed is born to be one day a giant oak. We also are born individually to be a unique, to express our uniqueness and our nature. And what happens is that we protect ourselves. We grow up in a world that tells us how we should be, and we end up protecting ourselves. And what I have always taught, or at least the last, as again from my own learning and research, what I've been teaching the last probably 10 years is you don't need to change yourself. You need to come home to yourself. And what happens is that the very thing that we use to protect ourselves, we're going to talk about masks next week in my webinar. The very thing that we use to protect ourselves actually protects ourselves, from expressing ourselves, from being who we are. And if we really want to maximize our impact, amplify our impact, have a meaningful life, it means in a caring way, gently and compassionately dissolving those masks that we use to protect ourselves, but that have imprisoned ourselves. And so caring, I don't know a way of bringing those masks down and dissolving the protection without caring. And it's a caring process for ourselves and for those around us. For those of us who care for others, this is our work, is to create you talked about psychological safety right off the bat here. And this is exactly in line with my work, to create places where people feel safe enough that they can let those protective barriers down. I've always had a passion for biology. And I took a course once on the biology of leadership. And what I realized is the cells in the human body only really serve two purposes. They serve to protect, or they serve to grow. And they can't do both simultaneously. And if cells are protecting, they can't grow. And if and they need to do both, but if they're protecting, they can't grow. And if they're growing, they can't protect. And so it's a continual yin yang in the human body going on all the time. And if we're not mindful, if we're on teams, in families, in communities, in the workplace, where people are protecting, where we're not able to be who we are, where we have to leave who we are at the door, and we're in a protective stance, then we aren't able to grow, because we're not the human human default state is relaxation. And if we're not in a relaxed place, then we are in a protective place. And so a big part of caring is to create places that care enough about people where they can allow that, not push it down, but allow it to dissolve the walls that we're using to protect ourselves. So caring is integral to this work around authentic expression.
And in the book, I think you articulate that really well with some of the stories that you share about some of the CEOs that you've worked with who have, for lack of a better phrase, gone on this journey of reflection and found their authentic selves. I hear that a lot. People are searching for authenticity, which I guess if I'm hearing you correctly, we have it. We all have, we're all, it's innate. The question from my perspective now is, are we courageous enough to share it with others? Christine, do you want to carry, do you have some comments around authenticity or a question that you might like to ask David?
Yeah, absolutely. So continuing there, in your book, you suggest that caring offers us another path to authenticity, and that caring and authenticity are inseparable, as we've been talking about. Curious about how you came to this realization. I think you kind of touched on that a little with with what you've studied, but can you explain further about why you feel this way and why it's so important?
Well, it's a great question, and this is what when this book started to unravel, and I began to realize, caring isn't just being nice to people. There's some deeper underlying challenges and opportunities that come along this topic of caring. So I grew up in a family with some trauma in it. The interesting thing is I'm writing my memoir now with my daughter, who that I do this podcast with, and I've always said, I don't know if anybody's going to be interested in my story, and she said, Dad, no, you have a really fascinating life. So I grew up and we never know the backstory of our families when we grow up. We only know the present experience. And my mom grew up in a very abusive family. She lost her husband in the Second World War. She had a stillborn baby when I was 18 months old, and she gave up a daughter. Her daughter gave up her daughter for adoption when she was 15. So this 1 year, she had all this loss, and then she had all the loss from the war and the trauma of being raised in this very abusive family. And I didn't know this then, but what I knew is that my mom had a temper. So I was raised in this family with a lot of encouragement and a lot of love and a lot of support, but it wasn't safe because I never knew when the shoe was going to drop. And so I developed a notion of the way I protected myself was to become the family therapist. And I was the family therapist when I was probably 8 years old. My brother, how he protected himself was he just went to his room and studied. He wasn't connected to the tension and the drama and the trauma. But I got in the middle of it. My dad also suffered from mental illness, so he was hospitalized for depression and the manic side on more than one occasion. So there was this instability. And my way of dealing with that is to become a helper. And it looked like it was caring, but it was actually carrying. And I think there's a big difference between caring and carrying. I was carrying the weight of the emotions in my family. I didn't know that it didn't belong to me. And I can read a room, and I was developing these gifts of being able to walk into a room. And it's one of the reasons why I've been able to succeed in my work is because I'm so sensitive. I'm sensitive to other people. And I learned that sensitivity, or at least I developed it. I think I had a propensity to it, but toward it, but I learned and developed it by reading the room. I could watch when my mother had a look on her face, and I could respond to her in a caring way, look caring, to attempt to suppress the anger because it was my way. And it really had nothing to do with caring. It was really just my survival. But I did it in respect. It was my survival response to a very uncertain family, and a very uncertain environment that I lived in. And it was a gift, but it also became a curse because it led to burnout because I had no boundaries. I was a very gifted family counselor in the 80s, but I had no boundaries because I just gave and gave and gave. And I just depleted myself. And one of the things I've realized, because I work a lot with caregivers and have over the years, and one of the things I've realized is that the very gift that it takes to be a caregiver, that sensitivity, that deep caring to want to be helpful, often if it comes from unacknowledged wounds, we will not care for ourselves because it's seen as going against the grain, and it's actually seen as selfishness when we care about ourselves. And until we really begin to look at the origins of where that need to care exceeded its function, and when it exceeds its function, which is survival, then it no longer is caring any longer. And I explore that dynamic quite in depth in the book about my own experience in coming to grips with my own mental health challenges. And it also led to all kinds of depression because I internalized all of the pain in my family. I internalized all that trauma because I thought if I'm not doing a good enough job, if I could just do a better job of managing the uncertainty, then I'll be okay. And it's a real what do I say about that? It's just not accurate. It's an inaccurate perception of the world that I needed to really examine through some careful, deep work.
That's really interesting, David. And it makes me think about how, from the outside looking in, it looks like you're doing everything right, right? And yet you're hurting yourself that you can't be fully authentic and yourself, and kind of putting that baggage down, like there's that metaphor, right? Putting that baggage down and stepping forward can be so very hard to do.
That's very well said. It looks really, it looks like, oh, this person is really a caring person, but they're actually dying inside because it's not coming from their authenticity. It's coming from their protective stance in the world. It's coming from their mask of trying to protect themselves. And part of it was coming from authenticity, but one of the ways that you know if it's coming from your authentic self, caring is not meant to be depleting. If you're truly caring, if it's truly authentic, you'll actually be energized. I think we've all had the experience of meeting someone on the street that needs caring, or meeting someone in our life that we just genuinely care about. And you will leave that environment, that situation, you'll leave feeling better about yourself. You'll feel more whole. You'll feel more alive. You'll feel more engaged in life. You'll feel more purposeful. Then you know that that's coming from authenticity, because that's who we are. We are by nature caring people. But when we exceed its function, where we start to use that caring to feel safe within ourselves, that's when we begin to get burned out and it becomes exhausted, and we get what we call compassion fatigue, because it's actually not an accurate term from my perspective. It feels like it's compassion fatigue, but it's exceeded its function. If we're truly compassionate, then it won't be as tiring. Now, granted, even though it's coming from authenticity, we still need a rest. And so there's good tired and there's bad tired. And so even if it's coming from authenticity, we still need a break from it. But it's a matter of really exploring what is the source of this need to care.
I think there's so many people who need to hear that message of caring is not meant to be depleting. That's just such a great phrase. Thank you.
It's not caring. If it is depleting,
No.
it's not caring.
No,
Caring
exactly.
is inherently meant to be life-giving.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Um,
I wrote
so
that phrase down as well, Christine, because that really resonated with me in terms of my experience and the different ways in which we care, like both for people in our family, but then also as leaders, right? As leaders in our community or with the teams that we're serving. So I really appreciated those insights, David.
yeah. So as Michelle mentioned earlier, that your book was published a decade ago. And one of the things that I'm curious about is, do you feel that message in your book is needed more today than ever? And what role does caring play in the role of today's leaders?
Well, it's interesting. I do believe that it's a timeless principle. Caring, the notion of caring and exploring the dynamics of caring is going to be with us probably as long as humans are around. I remember coaching. I was referred by a CEO to coach one of his senior executives, and the presenting problem was this person is just not getting the results on their team, and I don't know if I have the right person in this role, and would you help me assess this through a coaching relationship? I developed a good relationship with the CEO, and I met with this person, and all he did was complain for the first 10 minutes in the session about the young generation that he had to work with. And these guys don't have a work ethic, and they don't show up on time, and they have all these demands, and they have this entitlement. It was just on and on and on. And I just stopped him and I said, "Do you care?" And he said, "Of course I care. They're not getting the results that they want." And then he went on and on and on. And then I said, "No, I don't think you really heard my question." And he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Do you care?" And he said, "What do you mean, do I care? Do you care about them as human beings? Do you care what they go home to at night? Do you care what matters to them? Do you care what success means to them?" And it was he paused. And it was the first time I think he got honest in the session. And he said, "Not really." And I said, "Why don't you do yourself and your favor and your organization a favor and get out of management? Because you don't belong here." And what he did was he went back to a sales role because he cared about his customers, but he didn't care about a leadership role. And he was just in the wrong fit. And then because it was too stressful, for whatever reason, but it blocked his caring. The role that he was in, he actually did care, because I had some longer term relationship. He actually did care, but in the role that he was in, he was blocked from allowing that natural caring to come through. He was in the wrong role. In my words, it was the wrong fit. I always say, don't fix people, fit people. Don't straighten people out. Find a place where they can be authentic and let that caring naturally come through them. And caring is the foundation of leadership. We need to care genuinely, imperfectly. And, people will cut us a lot of slack if they know we care. And they won't cut us any slack if they know we don't care. And instinctively, caring is very synonymous with authenticity. You know when it's there. It's like beauty. You can't describe it. You can't articulate it necessarily, but when this person genuinely cares. And as the old idiom goes, that people really don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And you really have to be honest with yourself. Do I really care about the people that I'm working with and I'm serving? This is a service role, not a pleasing role, but a service role where we're genuinely wanting to be generous and help our people succeed around us.
That story is really interesting. In our world, people are always encouraged, you move up the ladder, you make more money, you're happier, your things are better. And so, I'm thinking for that leader you were coaching, that turning away from that leadership position and going to a different role may have been hard, because that's what we are taught. The world kind of tells us that we should be doing is moving up in organizations.
Well, yeah, and see, it's very difficult in bureaucracies. The only way to get a raise is to get a promotion. And unfortunately, not everybody's meant to be in a promotion. And we really need to revolutionize our workplaces so that we get our income is based on the value, not on our position. It's based on the value that we bring. And being in the right role and having the right fit is going to increase the probability of creating value for the organization. We've got to find ways of, if that's the only way I can make more money is to get a promotion, that's a bad reason for getting a promotion. I always ask people, why are you seeking a leadership role? Now, many people in leadership roles don't even seek it. They have been sought that you really need to be in a leadership role. And that's probably optimally the best motive to be in a leadership role, is not wanting to be. However, some people really want to understand that they want to make a broader impact, and they want to bring and they want to use their position, their title, to make a bigger impact on their organization. And so they can seek a leadership role, but always ask people what their motive is for seeking a promotion before you give people a promotion. And getting a raise and having more power and having a stronger ego is not a caring response to being into a leadership role. And if it's not caring, it's going to be hurtful to people. This is why caring is so important. If it's not authentically caring, you're going to be hurting people, yourself and others.
Thank you for that. We have a comment from Valerie about so many leaders are in a role by being promoted and forced there, and they shouldn't be because they don't fit. And she says she likes to call them bosses, not leaders.
Well, yes, yeah, that's the whole premise of my work is there's a difference between a boss and a leader, and sometimes we need both. But you know, yeah. So you become a boss without you. And I always say you can't get promoted to being a leader, and you're not really a leader until someone sees you as a leader. You can't call yourself a leader. It's the difference between a mom and mother. Or a dad and father. Everybody had a father. It's easy to be a father, but it's a lot harder to earn the right to be called dad or to be called mom. And that's you can't bestow that title on yourself, just like you can't get promoted to being a leader. You can get promoted to being a boss, but you can't get promoted to being a leader. That makes everybody a leader, whether you have a title or not.
That's so interesting, David, because I have a philosophy that everybody has the ability to be a leader. And I am not a huge fan of titles on business cards because I feel like it sort of puts us in these little boxes, and the way in which you influence and work with others, you may have been and we work with many individuals, particularly in construction and industrial roles, that get promoted because they are great, and I have seen them grow into leadership roles because of an opportunity that's afforded to them. Um, we use this phrase in a lot in our respectful workplace training around encouraging people at the outset to be courageous, curious, and caring. And I feel like if you can take those three words into your day-to-day work. So the example you just gave of that individual, that is a courageous decision to step away from a role that you just realize isn't a good fit because he found out he cared about something different. So, right, the role that caring played in his life, in his role as a leader or at his work, so interesting to me. So interesting.
And you talk about leading without a title, with or without a title. I remember working with a CEO once, and she said, I don't tell people this, but she was pretty explicit that she will not promote anybody in the organization until they spend 6 months in a volunteer organization. And she wants to see, can you lead? This is the hardest place to lead, is in a volunteer organization when your title doesn't mean anything. You gotta manage volunteers
Yeah.
and work and inspire volunteers. And she said, if leaders in my organization, if they can't do it as volunteers, then there's no way they're going to get a title because they're going to depend on their title to have influence. And I don't want those kind of leaders in my organization. Very wise.
Wow. Yeah, that is so interesting, because it speaks to the qualities that you're looking for in leaders, right? And sometimes, you probably like us work with organizations where I'm not sure people have clarity in that, right? What are we looking for in leaders? I think if leaders care, and they've experienced adversity, I know there's maybe more than a chapter in your book, but there's a particular part when you talk about adversity, and I'm going to go back to comment about your mom because I think it was your mom who used to tell you when adversity hit, it was worth seeing what you might learn. And oof, that one hit me because I think it encourages us to be curious despite sort of positive or difficult scenarios. So, I mentioned the three C's. Can you speak to, from your perspective, the role of curiosity and how it relates to caring, whether we're, a leader in our organization, our family, or our community?
Sure. So I'll use a story because curiosity opens the door to caring. And I don't know which comes first. It's the chicken and the egg thing. But so I was talk about coaching client who was having difficulty with the young generation. I had a very difficult time with my university class this semester because they weren't coming to class on time. They weren't showing up. They weren't engaged. It was really hard to motivate them. It was hard to inspire them. We just couldn't connect. And the more that they disconnected, the more I judged. And the more that I judged, and I don't know that I judged explicitly, but they felt it. And there was this barrier that was coming up. And I had them, and to use your words, I got curious instead of judgmental, instead of frustrated. I got curious, and I asked them to write a paper about their story. And I heard them talk about their social anxiety. And I heard them talk about how difficult it was to get through the pandemic. And I heard how hard it was for them to even show up. And it shifted the whole environment in the class. And what I learned from it is that I'm going to ask them to write that paper earlier in the semester so that I can get, and it was curiosity. I don't know that I used that word curiosity when I asked them to write that paper, but I said, I want to understand what's going on. And the paradox of it all is that it was a class teaching them how to reach their clients and how to build a bridge with their clients through understanding rather than through bringing their own agenda. So I was incongruent with what I was trying to teach them. And so curiosity is always been, whenever when we have a family member who looks differently, who thinks differently, who has a political orientation, a different religious orientation, what I want to be able to do is, instead of bringing my judgment, I want to bring my curiosity. And when I'm connected to my authenticity and when I'm connected to my caring nature, I want to bring curiosity. I don't necessarily have to agree to be curious, but I want to put myself into a learning place. What can this person teach me? What am I blind to? What am I not seeing? And that state of mind, because curiosity is just so inclusive. It breaks down the barriers to say, I'm not the smartest person in the room. What do other people feel about this? Help me understand. And it allows people to have input. It's not a technique. I always say, you don't want to diminish leadership. Leadership is way too important to be diminished to techniques and titles and positions. But what it is it's a presence. And when you genuinely bring that sense of curiosity, it will shift the whole dynamic in any relationship, including the relationship with yourself. When you find yourself frustrated in traffic, for example, you can shift away from frustration to curiosity. Curiosity will shift it. Get curious. What is it about me this morning that is impatient in traffic? It might be I didn't get enough sleep last night. Maybe I'm carrying something that doesn't belong to me. And get curious. And it's a beautiful way of making caring real in your life. It'll change the relationship with yourself, and it will shift the relationship with the people around us.
David, I really love that story. What I heard you saying is that you're meeting your students where they're at, not where you want them to be or where you expect them to be. And I also heard you kind of alluding to that we need to do that with ourselves. We need to meet ourselves where we are at.
It's the same principle. It's the same principle. And we're human. We forget it. How many of us are so judgmental of ourselves? But we talk about psychological safety. How do we create a safe place? Our team isn't going to grow if they don't feel safe, but then why would it be any different for ourselves? How could we possibly grow if we haven't created that safety within ourselves so that all those different aspects of ourselves can interact in a safe way, can feel not judged, but actually accepted and valued. And there's every part of ourselves has had a function at some point, but it maybe has exceeded that function. And it's like Schwartz's philosophy around internal family systems. We all have an internal family that lives within us, and just like we have an external family that we are around.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's interesting because, some people refer to their work as their family, and other people will say, well, I don't want that because their memory of a family is not a positive one, might not be positive, and work might be a safe space for them to sort of grow into the person and or be their authentic selves where maybe they couldn't be because of other situations. So I think that's very interesting. If people have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Absolutely. We are, someone's asking me if we're going to be sending a copy of the recording out. We will for sure. Yeah. So thanks to Christine for sharing that. David, I know we're getting a little bit short on time. I do want to let people ask questions if they want to. Although your thoughts, your comments have really gotten me thinking because we might, for some of us, I think caring comes naturally. I was born into a caring and loving family, and I experienced divorce many times through my parents, which to me actually brought out a caring environment. I had a lot of love that surrounded me, and I know that isn't always the case in situations like that, and I am constantly grateful for that. But I'd love to share or maybe have you talk about the concept of forgiveness, which you also talk about in your book. And I flagged with one of my little post-it notes a quote around forgiveness that said, forgiveness is one of the most courageous and precious acts of caring. I think forgiveness, in my observation, is a difficult concept for some people. And I'm wondering if you can expand on that comment of forgiveness being a courageous and precious act of caring. Um, its importance from your perspective.
Well, from my own experience, I've had to go through the process of forgiveness. Now, forgiveness is a bit of a loaded word. If you've had any kind of a hurtful experience in a religious upbringing, forgiveness can have a burning, a hurtful connotation to it. So I actually shift forgiveness. If you want to use, if you're comfortable with that word forgiveness, fine. But if you're not comfortable with the word forgiveness, you can change it to letting go. At some point, we must let go. I can tell you that there's only one task that you have toward your parents, and that is to get to a point when you can say thank you, where you can honestly say thank you. That doesn't mean you have to condone anything that went on, but if you don't feel grateful for your parents, genuinely grateful for the learning that you had because you got exactly what we needed growing up. We didn't necessarily get what we wanted, but we got what we needed because that's where we are today. But it's forgiveness or letting go, whichever term you want to use. I use them simultaneously. It's not a Sunday school platitude. It's not something that you just immediately say. I've worked with people who have siblings who have been murdered, who have had tremendous violence. Well, you're not going to wake up the next morning and be grateful for that and let go of that and forget. That's often what many of us are taught in our religious upbringing, is you just have to respond to all injustice through forgiveness. I'm talking about going through the years, sometimes years, of facing the anger, the grief, the loss. You have to go through the real grieving process. And you can't do this alone. You must do it in a supportive, authentic community, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a support group, whether it's a recovery group. You go through the hard work of facing all of those emotions that went with that trauma. But the goal is Sometimes it takes a lifetime, but the goal is to get to where you let go to a point of saying thank you.
Mm.
That anytime you've been hurt in your life, if you're carrying hurt and you're not doing the hard work of letting go, or if you want to use the word forgiveness, if you haven't done that hard work and you're not willing to do that hard work and face what's difficult, the very cave that we seek to, that we are afraid to enter, is where the gold is. And that's where the gold is in our life. Where we've been wounded is where we get the greatest gifts. But you got to have the courage. You talk about that courage to face that. And the goal is gratitude, where we genuinely can say, I don't like how I was treated. I don't, it was unjust. But at the same time, I'm grateful for the learning that came from it. And bringing that gratitude, until you've brought that gratitude, you can't really feel and experience your full greatness as a leader or as a human being, for that matter.
Yeah, yeah. I would agree. The goal is gratitude. That phrase alone is just absolute gold, because I met a leader who used to work for the city of Edmonton, and one of the things that she shared in her leadership journey was a gratitude app. And it was just an opportunity, you know, whether you use a journal or an app or whatever, to just write down, what am I grateful for today? And in some of the most difficult days, when I sat and just reflected on that, um, you know, it sends your mind to a different place, and being able to let go. I think you're right. It is extremely courageous, but that extension of thought where you said, you know, letting go to a point of where you can say thank you, that's powerful. That's powerful.
Yeah, and it's not, if you think it's easy, you haven't done it.
No,
And it
no,
isn't
yeah,
just
I
saying that you're
would
grateful.
agree. Yeah, I would agree. If you think it's easy, then you probably haven't done it. There was a really nice comment that was sent to just the hosts and panelists, so I won't share the name, but I really love their thought. Caring is such a key foundational factor in unlocking a healthy and safe culture within an organization. What baby steps, from your perspective, David, could you offer that would be key to moving the dial in a positive way in terms of, you know, creating a safer culture?
Oh, it's a great question. A baby step is listen. Listen twice as much as you talk.
Okay.
It's why we have two ears and only one mouth, is
Mm-hmm.
really value each other. Value a team member. It could be a partner. It could be a team member. It could be
Mm-hmm.
a boss, where you can manage upwards, where you take the time to say, I really want to understand, what is
Mm-hmm.
it that's important to you here? What am I missing? What do you value? What's important to you? And care enough to just take the time. And often it's just slowing down. When you go and buy your groceries
Mm-hmm.
tonight at a grocery store, that every clerk has a name, and every
Mm-hmm.
clerk has a name tag. They have a name tag because they have a name, and they have a name because they have a story. And what if you could just take 30 seconds and just care enough to lift, be a lifter while you get those groceries, and maybe you could make her or his day better just by your presence. You be the light in an organization, on a team. And the best way to express that is through listening and really valuing each other. But it is about slowing down. We are so busy. Oftentimes, see, I think caring is in all of us. And even if we've had a very hurtful upbringing in our families, and we cover that caring up, we don't see it, and it's in us, but we have
Mm-hmm.
to slow down to have it come out. And
Mm-hmm.
I find busyness in organizations and just the rate of demands on people, we're just too busy to care about each other, is what I
Mm-hmm.
often hear. And you got to stop that. And maybe it means, when you send an email that's very transactional, on the bottom of the email, write a caring statement. Hey, I just realized I haven't expressed how much I appreciate you being on this team for this reason, or pick
Mm-hmm.
up the phone, or go down the hall if you work in the same office place and say, you know what, I just realized I haven't given you any positive feedback in the last little while. I haven't let you know how much I appreciate what you've contributed to this team. And just start to be mindful. Just look around your world and
Mm-hmm.
say, where can I express some caring on this team right now? Maybe it's listening, maybe it's positive feedback. And I do go back to those whole notion of love languages and ask yourself, what are people's appreciation language? What's their language of appreciation? Is it words? Is it
Mm-hmm.
active service? Is,
Yes.
whatever, how you express it. Anyway, I hope that helps. It gives people a simple action.
Yeah, I encourage everyone today to be a lifter. I know that we have both Christine and I are trained executive coaches, and we have other coaches on the webinar right now live. And in my training, one of the things that we use that was suggested by one of the attendees is what worked well. There's an opportunity to sort of look back on our day and say, what worked well today, and that's another way to express some daily gratitude. So I appreciate the person who brought that forward, and it is one of the first skills we learn as coaches is to
Yeah.
listen.
It just brings up, I just have one more quick story. I worked
Yeah.
with WestJet back in the 90s, back when they actually had a really good culture. And they taught me a principle, a practice: never start a meeting without a story. And they'd have 5 minute story before every operational meeting. And the story was, where do they want to reinforce a value? And you know what? If you want to create more caring on your team, that's a value that you want to bring. If you want to bring, you can use that with any value, but just start with a caring story. Where have we
You
seen
can.
caring? What does caring look like here? And start
Mhm.
to make caring explicit in your family and
Yeah.
on your team.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think organizations could do that using their values. I am very blessed to be part of an incredible United Way volunteer cabinet team. And I don't know who started this idea, but every month we have a round table of one good thing. And that's how we start our meeting. And some days it's hard to find one good thing, right? And it's 7:30 in the morning, so not a lot might have happened that day, but it has allowed us to really bond as a team because we've started sharing, not just professional things, but personal things. And you're right, David. It takes us maybe 5 to 7 minutes to go through, and I just feel like I just never want to stop working with the individuals in that team because we've created such a connection, and you then become curious about their lives outside of the meetings, which I think is what we've talked about all today. So I am so grateful. I want to make sure that we end on time. If anyone has any other questions, please do feel free to put them into the chat. We are going to offer a copy of the recording to everybody who registered. So thank you for those of you who took the time today. But as we close, David, I kind of wanted to give you the last word before we just kind of do some summary comments. Is there one question that maybe you wish we would have asked, or what message do you hope that you leave with a reader who picks up this book, Caring is Everything? What kind of final word would
Well,
you like to share as the author?
well, thank you. It's a very caring interview. And both of you have got such big hearts, and I connect with you so well. And I just want to express my gratitude before we close.
Thank
I
you.
think my message is we need to all slow down. We need to, I know that devices can be an important tool, but they've become our slave. We don't have 5 seconds anymore to just be alone with our thoughts. And when you say we get to a meeting and we can't find anything caring, caring is a lot like beauty. It's all around us.
Mhm.
But what we need to do is to slow down so that we can notice it. Caring is all around us. It's like if when you're late for a meeting, you won't see the beauty of the parks that you're driving through because you're too focused on the anxiety and the busyness. And what I would suggest is that if we slow down and look into each other's eyes, we'll see all kinds of caring. And let's shine a light. I'll just say this is a darkened world right now. We're divided on many fronts. I've never seen, I was born 10 years after the Second World War, where we had safety guards We had safeguards against tyrants and greed in the world. We don't have those anymore. This is the world we're moving into, and more than anything right now, we need to open our hearts and have these conversations like you're doing today, and stop and see the beauty in each other. And instead of what's dividing us, let's look at what's bringing us together. That's what the world needs. So thank you very much.
I love that. And I do think that comes out of your book, David. Like I said, I had a very different experience rereading it, and I don't often reread a book. So that's, great accolades for you. And I do want to encourage, people are asking, where can we buy the book? David, where can we buy the book?
You can get it on Amazon.
Yep.
Caring is everything.
Yep.
Or you can order it directly on our website. I'd love to hear from any of you. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to connect with any of you.
Yeah, so you will be able to find a copy of this recording on the Creating People Power YouTube channel. But if you want to go to David's website, he also has some free ebooks on there. So it's davidirvine.com, where you can learn more about David and find links to his webinars and the absolutely delightful podcast that he hosts with his daughter, Haley. I'm telling you, if you're a podcaster, you have to add this one to your list. So, if you enjoy podcasts, and if you enjoyed this conversation today, I would encourage you to sign up for our Creating People Power newsletter. We only send it out once a month, but it will have upcoming Readers of the Pack events. So stay tuned for that. And if you have books or authors that you think we should connect with, please send Christine or I a note. Watch our website for upcoming reviews. And I just, Christine and I are both very passionate readers, but also hopefully people will see that we're also very passionate leaders. And so we are extremely grateful to have had you here today, David. And I wanted to close with a quote actually from your book. And if you're looking for it, folks, it's on page 33. It has been a guide for me over the past couple of weeks. It says, caring is not a destination, it is a method of travel. Thank you for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you so much, David. Take care,
everyone. Take care, everybody.